The Apocalypse of Adam. The revelation, apocalypse, which Adam taught his son Seth in the 700th year, saying, "Listen to my words, my son Seth. When God created me out of the earth, along with Eve, your mother, I used to go about with her in a glory which she had seen in the aeon from which we had come. She taught me a word of knowledge of the eternal God, and we were like the great eternal angels, for we were loftier than the God who created us, and the powers that were with him, whom we did not know. Then God, the ruler of the aeons and the powers, separated us wrathfully, and then we became two aeons, and the glory in our hearts deserted us, me and your mother Eve, along with the first knowledge that used to breathe within us. And the glory fled from us, entering into other great aeons and another great race, one that did not come from the aeon that we came from, I and Eve, your mother. But the knowledge entered into the seed of the great aeons. That is why I myself have called you by the name of that man who is the seed of the great race, or from whom it comes. After those days, the eternal knowledge of the God of truth withdrew from me and your mother Eve, and since that time we have learned about dead things, like men. Then we recognized the God who created us, for we were not strangers to his powers, and we served him in fear and subjection, and afterwards our hearts were darkened. Now I was sleeping in the thought of my heart, and I saw before me three men, whose appearance I could not recognize, because they were not from the powers of the God who created me. They surpassed those powers in their glory. The men spoke, saying to me, "Rise up, Adam, from the from the sleep of death, and hear about the aeon and the seed of that man to whom life has come, the one who came forth from you and from Eve, your wife." When I heard these words from those great men who stood before me, we sighed in our hearts, I and Eve, and the Lord, the God who created us, stood in our presence and said to us, "Adam, why were you sighing in your hearts? Do you not know that I am God who created you, and that I breathed into you a spirit of life for a living soul?" Then darkness fell over our eyes. Then the God who created us created a son from himself, and Eve, your mother. 3 lines missing. Then I was defiled in the thought of my heart. I recognized a sweet desire for your mother. Then the vigor of our eternal knowledge perished in us, and feebleness pursued us. For this reason the days of our life became few, for I knew that I had become subject to the power of death. Now then, my son Seth, I will reveal to you what was revealed to me by those men whom I once saw before me. After I completed the times of this generation and the years of the generation have been fulfilled, then, 3 lines missing, rain showers of God the Almighty will be poured forth, so that he may destroy all flesh from the earth because of the things it seeks after, including those who come from the seed of the men to whom the life of knowledge, which went out from me and Eve, your mother, who passed on, for they were strangers to him. Afterwards, great angels will come on high clouds to bring those men to the place where the Spirit of life dwells. 7 lines missing. From heaven to earth. But the whole multitude of flesh will be left behind in the waters, and then God will rest from his wrath. He will cast his power upon the waters, and he will give power to Noah and his wife, and his sons and their wives by means of the ark, together with their animals, whichever he pleased, and the birds of heaven which he called and placed upon the earth. And God will say to Noah, whom the nations will call Deucalion, "Behold, I have guarded you in the ark, together with your wife, and your sons, and their wives, and their animals, and the birds of heaven which you called and placed upon the earth." 4 lines missing. For this reason I shall give the earth to you and your sons. In the sovereignty you shall rule over it. You and your sons, and from you no seed will come forth of the men who will not stand in my presence in another glory. Then they will be like the cloud of the great light. Those men will come to the ones who were sent forth from the knowledge of the great ones, the great aeons and the aeons, and the angels. They will stand in the presence of Noah and the aeons. And God will say to Noah, "Why have you departed from what I told you? You have created another race in order that you might scorn my power." Then Noah will reply, "I shall bear witness before your might that it is not from me that the race of these men has come, nor from my sons." 5 lines missing. And he will release those men and bring them into their proper land, and build them a holy dwelling place, and they will be called by that name, and will dwell there 600 years in a knowledge of imperishability, and angels of the great light will dwell with them. Nothing abominable will be in their hearts, but only the knowledge of God. Then Noah will divide all the earth among his sons, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. He will say to them, "My sons, hear my words. Behold, I have divided the earth among you. But serve him in fear and subjection all the days of your life. Do not let your seed depart from the face of God the Almighty." 5 lines missing. Then Shem, the son of Noah, will say, "My seed will be pleasing before you and before your power. Put a seal on it with your strong hand in fear and commandment, so that all the seed that has come forth from me will not be inclined away from you and God the Almighty, but they will serve in humility and fear of their knowledge." Then from the seed of Ham and Japheth others will go, 400,000 men, and will enter into another land and sojourn with those men who come forth from the great eternal knowledge. For the shadow of their power will guard those who have sojourned among them from every evil deed and every foul desire. Then the seed of Ham and Japheth will make 12 kingdoms, and their other seed will enter the kingdom of another peoples. 3 lines missing. Great aeons of imperishability. And they will approach Sakla, their god. They will go in the powers, making accusations against the great men who dwell in their glory. They will say to Sakla, "What is the power of these men who have stood in your presence, the ones who were taken from the seed of Ham and Japheth to become 400,000 men? They have been received into another aeon, the one from which they came forth, and they have overturned all the glory of your power and dominion of your hand. For the seed of Noah from his son has done all your will together with all the powers in the aeons over which your might rules, while both those men and the ones who are sojourners in their glory have not done what you wished. Instead, they have turned aside your entire multitude. Then the God of aeons will give them some of those who will serve him." 1 line missing. They will come to that land where dwell the great men who have not been defiled, nor will be defiled by any desire. For it is not from a defiled hand that their soul has come, but it came from a great commandment of an eternal angel. Then they will cast fire and sulfur and asphalt upon those men, and fire and mist will come over those aeons, and the eyes of the powers of the luminaries will be darkened, so that the aeons may not see them in those days. And great clouds of light will come down, and other clouds of light will descend on them from great aeons. Abrasax and Sablo and Gamaliel will come down to take those men out of the fire and the wrath, and bring them above the aeons and the rulers of the powers, and take them away. 3 lines missing. Dwelling place of the great ones, missing text. There with the holy angels and the aeons, the men will resemble those angels, for they are not strangers to them, but they are at work in the imperishable seed. Again, for the 3rd time, the illuminator of knowledge will pass by in great glory in order to leave a remnant of the seed of Noah and the sons of Ham and Japheth, so that he might leave behind for himself fruit-bearing trees. And he will redeem their souls from the day of death, for the whole creation that came from the dead earth will be subject to the powers of death. But those who reflect the knowledge of the eternal God in their hearts will not perish, for they have not received spirit from this kingdom alone, but from an eternal angel they have received it. 4 lines missing. Of Seth. and he will do signs and wonders in order to scorn the powers and their rulers. Then the God of the powers will be disturbed, saying, What is the power of the man who is loftier than we? Then he will stir up a great wrath against the man, and the glory will withdraw and dwell in the holy houses, which it has chosen for itself. The powers will not see it with their eyes, nor will they see the illuminator either. Then they will punish the flesh of the man upon whom the Holy Spirit has come. Then the angels and all the races of the powers will use the name in error, asking, Where has the error come from? Or where have the words of deception, which all the powers have failed to discover, come from? Now the first kingdom says of him, he came, 3 lines missing, a spirit, missing text, to heaven. He was nourished in the heavens. He received the glory of that one and the power. He came to the bosom of his mother, and thus he came to the water. The second kingdom says about him that he came from a great prophet. And a bird came, took the child who was born, and carried him into a high mountain. And he was nourished by the bird of heaven, and angels came forth there and said to him, Rise up. God has given you glory. He received glory and strength, and thus he came to the water. The third kingdom says of him that he came from a virgin womb. He was cast out of his city and his mother. He was taken to a desert place. He was nourished there. He came and received glory and power, and thus he came to the water. The fourth kingdom says of him, he came from a virgin, missing text, Solomon, sought her, and he, Pharisalo, and Samuel, and his armies, which had been sent out. Solomon also sent his army of demons to seek the virgin, and they did not find the one they sought, but the virgin who was given to them was the one they fetched. Solomon took her. The virgin conceived and gave birth to the child there. She nursed him on a border of the desert. When he had been nourished, he received glory and power from the seed from which he had been begotten, and thus he came to the water. The fifth kingdom says of him that he came from a drop from heaven, and was cast into the sea. The abyss received him, brought him forth, and took him to heaven. He received glory and power, and thus he came to the water. The sixth kingdom, 2 lines missing, which is below, in order to gather flowers. She conceived from the desire of the flowers, and gave birth to him in that place, and the angels of the flower garden nourished him. He received glory there and power, and thus he came to the water. And the seventh kingdom says of him, he is a drop. It came from heaven to earth. Dragons brought him down to caves. He became a child. A spirit came upon him and took him on high to the place where the drop had come from, and he received glory and power there, and thus he came to the water. The eighth kingdom says of him, a cloud came upon the earth and enveloped a rock. He came from it. The angels who were above the cloud nourished him. He received glory and power there, and thus he came to the water. The ninth kingdom says of him, of the 9 muses, one separated away. She went to a high mountain, spent some time dwelling there so as to desire herself alone, that she might become androgynous. She fulfilled her desire and conceived from her desire. He was brought forth. The angels who were over the desire nourished him, and he received glory there and power, and thus he came to the water. The 10th kingdom says of him, his God loved a cloud of desire. He begot him in his hand and cast some of the drop upon the cloud near him. He has brought forth. He received glory and power there, and thus he came to the water. The 11th kingdom says the father desired his own daughter. She also conceived from her father. She put the child in a tomb out in the desert, and the angel nourished him there, and thus he came to the water. The 12th kingdom says of him, he came from the 2 luminaries. He was nourished there. He received glory and power, and thus he came to the water. And the 13th kingdom says of him, every birth of their ruler is a word, and this word received a mandate there. He received his glory and power, and thus he came to the water so that the desire of those powers might be fulfilled. But the race without a king over it says, God chose him from all the aeons. He made a knowledge of the undefiled one, of truth exist in him. He said from an alien air, out of a great aeon the great illuminator has come forth. And he had made the race of those men whom he chose for himself to shine, so that they should shine upon the whole aeon. Then the seed will fight against the power, those who will receive his name upon the water, and of them all. And a cloud of darkness will come upon them. Then the peoples will cry out with a loud voice, saying, Blessed is the soul of those men, because they have known God with a knowledge of the truth. They will live for aeons of aeons, because they have not been corrupted in their desire with the angels, nor have they accomplished the works of the powers, but they have stood before him in a knowledge of God, like the light that has come out of the fire and blood. But we have done every deed of the powers senselessly. We have gloried in the transgression of all of our works. We have cried out against God, 2 lines missing, is eternal, missing text, our spirits. For now we know that our souls will surely die. Then a voice came to them, saying, Mikio and Mikiar and Menesinos, who are over the holy baptism in the living water, why were you crying out against the living God with impious voices and tongues, without law over them, and souls full of blood and abominable deeds? You are full of works that are not of the truth, but your ways are full of gladness and joy. Having defiled the water of life, you have drawn it within the will of the powers to whom you have been given to serve them. And your thought does not resemble that of those men whom you persecute, for they have not obeyed your desires, and their fruit does not wither, but they will be known to the great aeons, because the words they have kept of the God of the aeons were not set down in the book, nor were they written, but angelic beings will bring them. They will bring them words which all generations of men will not know, for they will be on a high mountain upon a rock of truth. For this reason they will be called the words of imperishability and truth, of those who know the eternal God in wisdom, of knowledge and teaching of eternal angels, for he knows all things. These are the revelations which Adam made known to Seth his son, and his son taught his seed about them. This is the secret knowledge of Adam, which he imparted to Seth, which is the holy baptism of those who know the eternal knowledge, to the ones born of the Word and the imperishable illuminators, those who came from the holy seed, Jesias, Mazarias, Jezetikias, the living water.